Good morning. Happy Tuesday.
Morning, everybody. Hello, hello. Thanks for joining. All right. Well, thanks for joining everybody for our August 18th Technical Assistance Tuesday office hours. Good to see everybody. Our distribution list is still, or our attendance list is still looking pretty light. So, if you wouldn't mind, everybody check within your internal organizations and make sure everybody on your team has the meeting invite and the registration link to get registered for this series of meetings every other Tuesday. We want to get those numbers built back up. I think we were around what, like 80 or something like that before, Mikhail. So yeah, we've definitely got some folks missing. So I think Mikhail will send this out to our network here hopefully later this week. But if you wouldn't mind checking internally with your staff to make sure they have this on their calendars as well. So yes, also just want to quick remind folks that we do have our in-person CEJA NOFO preview workshops starting this week. And so if you're interested in applying for CEJA workforce training grant opportunities in cycle two, please do register for those events or one of those events closest to you. And with that, we will jump into our presentation for today. Uh, Happy to be joined by Ola Tomaszewski and Esther Kim from Illinois Power Agency. And they are going to be talking to us today about CEJA equity initiatives at IPA, the Illinois Shines program, and the IPA Energy Equity Portal. So I will turn it over, and Ola Tomaszewski is the outreach coordinator, and she'll be joined today by Esther Kim, the DEI partnerships manager, and they're both at Illinois Power Agency. So we're excited to have them on today. So thanks for joining, and the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Nate. I'm gonna steal the screen share here. We do have some slides prepared for everybody. I see some familiar names, so it's good to see those that I've met before. And for those who don't know me, as Nate mentioned, my name is Ola Tomaszewski. I am the outreach coordinator for Illinois Shines, for the program administrator of Illinois Shines, which is Energy Solutions. And I'm joined here today with Esther Kim with the Illinois Power Agency. So quick snapshot at the agenda. Esther will be going through Illinois Power Agency programs and initiatives, just about the Illinois Power Agency, CEJA, the minimum equity standard, and the energy workforce equity portal. And then I'll go into and dive into some of the specifics on participating in Illinois Shines, what is Illinois Shines and the equity framework within the program. And at the end, we'll probably have about 20 minutes for some questions and discussion. All right, so I've already done some introductions, but here you have some photos as well as our contact information. And without further ado, I'll pass it on to Esther to get us started with the IPA.
Cool. Thanks, Ola, and thanks, Nate and Kale, for letting us join today. I do see, like as Ola said, a lot of familiar faces, so some of this may sound repetitive, but there's also something I wanted to highlight on the equity portal to see how we can ensure your folks are being able to see some of the job opportunities in the solar industry. So today we'll do a high-level overview of CEJA, specifically how CEJA touches the IPA's work. We're going to talk about equity eligible persons. We're going to talk about the portal, and then we're going to talk about the minimum equity standard. Okay, next slide, please. All right. So there's just a lot of acronyms in our programs. There's a lot of acronyms across government programs as well, and probably in your own organizations. So if it's helpful, I would take a quick snapshot of this. I'll give like another 10 seconds to take a picture of it. We're also happy to share these slides with you after. And I'll make sure to call out these acronyms specifically when we're going through the slides. And if you're confused about what I'm talking about, just drop it in the chat and I'll make sure to clarify exactly what we're talking about. Next slide, please. Okay. So who's the IPA? So the Illinois Power Agency, they're IPA. We're an independent state agency created in 2007. And essentially the IPA is in charge of procuring and planning of electricity for Illinoisans. So that's both the residents and businesses. And our mission is to deliver clean, reliable, and cost-effective energy across the state and to secure a clean, reliable, and cost-effective energy future. So a few of the things that we do that support this is we're responsible for the long-term renewable resources plan, or you may have heard it called the long-term plan. And it has proposals for implementing our programs and procurements to incentivize new renewable energy projects. And then for the management of increased funding to meet more renewable portfolio standard goals. So essentially, we're pretty important when it comes to like driving the clean energy transition to renewables. And we'll talk a little bit about Illinois Shines, which is one of our solar programs that support this. Secondly, we have competitive procurements for utility scale projects. So those are 5 megawatts or bigger projects. And then again, I just said we have our solar incentive programs. Slide, please. Okay, cool. So CEJA, we're all aware of what CEJA is. It passed in 2021. It's critical for our growing clean energy economy. It set that benchmark in 2050 that will be 100% clean energy in Illinois. But then we also know that when it was being passed, that diversity and equity became front and center in the transition to make sure that the benefits of us transitioning to clean energy, both economically and environmentally, went to communities that were removed from opportunities in the clean energy sector, economic wise and job wise and business wise, as well as we're reaching folks who are subject to disproportionate levels of pollution and are facing those negative public outcomes from being exposed to it for a long amounts of time. And so the IPA plays a role in CEJA in this transition. As I just said, we run that long-term plan, which supports the renewable portfolio standard. However, on the equity side of things and the workforce side, business side, we have a lot of equity and diversity requirements in our programs, and some of which touch your folks who you're training. And so as it relates to workforce, we're going to discuss that minimum equity standard, equity eligible persons, and the workforce equity portal. Those are tools and some policies that directly support the folks in your programming to be employed in the clean energy sector and to even find ways to become entrepreneurs or small business owners in the clean energy economy as well. And so, as we all know, CEJA, Clean and Reliable Grid Act, also passed in 2026, which was basically an expansion of CEJA. So our responsibilities are continually expanding, and it's vastly grown our agency's responsibilities and roles. Something else that's notable about IP's work when it comes to these equity initiatives is data collection and reporting efforts. So one of the priorities was for us to make sure we are tracking who's working in our clean energy economy, to make sure we know as the clean energy economy expands that we see where people are working across the state. And so we collect demographic information. We also have this energy, it's clean energy, what's it called? The workforce that we'll look it up. It was like it's a data dashboard on our energy workforce equity portal. And it will have live data of who's working in our clean energy economy, which includes some of your folks. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so let's get into it. So there's two important designations in CEJA. The first is equity eligible persons or EEPs. So an equity eligible person is defined as a person who would most benefit from equitable investments by the state designed to combat discrimination. So there are 4 different ways you can qualify as an EEP. The first is if you are a graduate or former participant in the following training programs. So you'll see in that list that that includes the CEJA workforce hubs, the CEJA Climate Works pre-apprenticeships, the contractor and the incubator programs. And then we also have the returning residents, which is coming online. And then there's also the FEJA programs, the Future Energy Jobs Act. So the Clean Energy Primes, or so the Solar Training Pipeline and the Multicultural Jobs Program. If you have folks who are in those FEJA programs, have been in the FEJA programs, they would also qualify as an EEP. The second way to qualify as an EEP is to be a graduate or currently enrolled in the foster care system. The third is people who are formerly incarcerated. And then the fourth is people whose primary residence is in what we call an equity investment eligible community, or EIEC, which we'll outline in the next slide. Thanks, Sola. Okay. So as we just saw, one of the ways to qualify as an EEP is to live in an equity investment eligible community, or an EEC. And these regions across the state are defined as areas that would most benefit from equitable investments by the state designed to combat discrimination. So if you look at this map, this is really actually a combination of two maps. So it includes our three areas. The R3 map is areas where residents have historically been excluded from economic opportunities, including opportunities in the energy sector. And then we have the environmental justice communities, or EJ communities, where residents have historically been subject to disproportionate burdens of pollution, including pollution from the energy sector as well. So the combination of these maps make our equity investment eligible community map. And then on our energy workforce equity portal, you're able to see if your client lives in one of these areas. Right, next slide, please. Okay, so the second important designation under the IPA is the equity eligible contractor, or an EEC. And so an EEC is a business that's majority owned by equity eligible persons. It can also be a nonprofit or cooperative that's majority governed by EEPs, or you can be an independent contractor offering personal services and you yourself are an equity eligible person. And the reason I share this is if you have clients who are interested in have a more of a business mindset, or they're interested or more entrepreneurial and they would like to be a business owner and they see themselves wanting to scale up, becoming an equity eligible contractor is something that's kind of designed for our EEPs. So EEPs have to be the majority owner of a company. And the way that EECs participate in our program is in our Illinois Shine Solar program. And Ola's going to dive into this a little bit more, but there are certain benefits for equity eligible contractors. Have a designated capacity block in our Illinois Shines, so that's our solar program that's exclusively available only for our EECs. And then we also have some other like advance of capital, so we'll give them 50% of their contract value predating the project development, which just means you have some of the capital up front to develop your projects, as we know that's a pretty big barrier for business development. So we'll talk about that more later, or Ola will, and she can answer more of your questions. Next slide, please. Okay, so the minimum equity standard. So the minimum equity standard is the minimum percentage of project workforce for participating projects that consist of equity eligible persons or contractors. So that sounds like a lot. I'll break it down a little bit because I know it can be confusing. So it applies to our solar incentive programs. We talked about Illinois Shines. And then we have our competitive procurements, so those 5 megawatts or bigger projects. We also have energy storage coming online soon, so this minimum equity standard would apply to that. And if you are an equity eligible contractor, you also have to comply with the minimum equity standard. And essentially what this is, it's that minimum percentage of project workforce on these programs I just shared that have to be EEPs. And so the way it works is it's incremental by percentage, and we're going to top out at 30% in 2030. So if solar company A in 2026, 2027 is participating in our Shines project, they have a 4 or 5 megawatt community solar project. 14% of their workforce must be equity eligible persons to be in compliance with the IPA's programs. Meaning if you have 100 staff working on this project, 14 of them have to be EEPs. If it was 2030, 30% of those, or 30 people would have to be EEPs. And so this very much applies to the folks coming out of your programs who are being trained to work on solar, as well as have some like wins, competitive procurements as well. And this minimum equity standard really is that driving force to make sure that people aren't just being trained, but we are seeing inclusivity of our EEPs in our clean energy economy. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so just to close the loop here. So this minimum equity standard is crucial to this equity initiatives to make sure that CEJA is truly being equally distributed across the state. And so CEJA created that equity accountability system, mandating that minimum equity standard for some of our programs and procurements. And then this minimum equity standard helps ensure that this growing clean energy economy that we're pouring lots of money into is accessible by everyone. And therefore, under this minimum equity standard, this increasing portion of the workforce of an entity or company participating in our program or competitive procurements have to meet these baseline equity requirements. And like I said, these are not optional requirements. These are ones that we ask our vendors or our entities participating in our programs to meet. Next slide, please. Okay. And so also want to call out that though we don't work to run the workforce programs, we work very closely with the DCEO, as you know, who does work and run these workforce programs outlined in CEJA. And IPA is charged with implementing those equity initiatives within our programming. And we also have established this energy workforce equity portal, which we'll talk about on the next slide, to connect EEPs, or that includes your folks, to clean energy companies, and then making sure that this minimum standard is met by companies participating in our programs and procurements. I think it can be a little confusing with the different governments and departments and how we all work together, but when it comes to kind of think about it more of the solar development side in our companies, you can think of the IPA. You can think of the IPA when it comes to enrolling your folks as equity eligible persons and other types of resources. Next slide, please. Okay, cool. So I'll encourage you to take a picture of this QR. This is going to lead you to the Energy Workforce Equity Portal, which we've been talking about a bit. So our Energy Workers Equity Portal is an online tool to connect our EEPs and EECs to clean energy companies and resources. And so a few things you can do on there is individuals can determine if they qualify and register as an equity eligible person. Importantly, just because you qualify as an equity eligible person doesn't mean you are one. You have to register as one in order to be counted towards somebody's workforce. So we encourage anyone in the programs or who graduated from them or who meet the qualifications by being formerly incarcerated, foster care system, or living in an equity investment eligible community to register, because companies are going to have to meet this MES. It may give them more of an edge to get into these projects because they need EEPs. As a nonprofit working with your folks, you can also enroll your clients as EEPs on their behalf as well. Secondly, we have features on the portal that connects EEPs with prospective employers. Clean energy companies can register with us and they'll post jobs and they can recruit from the Workforce Equity Portal. We have a job board. EEPs, clean energy companies can verify the status of their current employees as EEPs. So if they want to see if on their roles to see who is an EEP, they can go in our portal and check that as well. We have the clean energy workforce, the CEJA workforce training programs basically on our portal. So if folks who are enrolling as EEPs haven't quite yet been connected to any of you guys, they can go on our portal and find the workforce program near them. And we also provide a list of current equity eligible contractors and qualified job training programs to help employers meet the minimum equity standard. I also want to call out, that's not on this slide, that you can also find out if you live in an equity investment eligible community on this equity portal. So if that is one of the ways that your clients would like to qualify as an EEP, that's an option to them. And then we recently launched the data dashboard that will show you how many EEPs and EECs are working in our clean energy economy and their demographic data and background about where they live or gender and race and whatnot. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I wanted to call this out specifically on the Energy Workforce Equity Portal. So there's a Clean Energy Companies and Job Board. If you go on the For Job Seekers page, on this front page, you're gonna see this page with the yellow banner. Thanks, Pal. And you'll see a job seekers page. If you go on there, you're gonna scroll down to this section that says get started, so you can register as an EEP. You can find jobs in the clean energy industry. But what I wanted to specifically show everyone here today was this connect with clean energy companies. So one of the ongoing discussions we've had and with DCEO as well as just grantees like you all is kind of the coordination piece that you want to have relationships with clean energy companies and not just have your participants being applying to these jobs off your job boards. I know that's a really big deal. I come from the world of workforce. This list of clean energy companies are clean energy companies that registered with us, and it's quite more populated than the job board itself. It has contact information, and so I encourage you to look at that and use that as like a jumping off point for you to start building relationships in the clean energy world to get your folks employed. And at the end, if it's helpful, I can definitely share my screen and we can look through together or work through the equity portal if there's anything I can clarify further. Next slide, please. Okay, perfect. Pass it to Ola.
Thanks, Esther, and thanks for that great overview. So I'm going to build on kind of what Esther talked about and how it pertains to the Illinois Shines program specifically. Sorry, this is not moving forward. Okay, there we go. So the Illinois Shines program is one of our flagship state solar programs, along with the Illinois Solar for All program. That was created under the Future Energy Jobs Act in 2016 and greatly expanded under CEJA to include these equity initiatives that Esther talked about. And the entire goal of the program is to support our state's goal of being 100% clean energy generated by 2015. So how the program works is by incentivizing approved vendors to submit solar projects to our program and develop these projects by receiving REC incentives. So renewable energy credit is kind of our standard unit of measurement in the program, and it does represent 1 megawatt hour of renewable energy produced by a solar project. So our role as a program administrator is to Okay, so our role as program administrator is to vet and approve these approved vendors who then develop these projects, submit them to the program, and then they enter a REC contract with the utilities. And so they'll receive these incentives directly from the utilities, and they may pass along the value of these incentives to their customers by the form of reduced purchase prices, lease agreements, or any other methods agreed upon in the contract. And kind of building on what Esther mentioned or talked about, really, all of these components, the minimum equity standard, the equity eligible persons designation, and then the equity eligible contractor category is meant to work together. And this was all introduced in CEJA. So the minimum equity standard, that is required for every single participant in the Illinois Shines program. They have to comply with this requirement, this percentage of EEPs in their workforce, and that will continue to grow. That percentage will grow to 30% by 2030. So what the minimum equity standards is meant to do in the program is to create this ongoing demand of EEPs. So these individuals that are going through your programs, they all qualify as an equity eligible person. So that's kind of the workforce and the demand for hiring that workforce and utilizing the Energy Workforce Equity Portal to do so. The other pathway for EEPs is business ownership as an equity eligible contractor. So equity eligible contractor is a business that's majority owned by an equity eligible person. And the EEC certification process happens within Illinois Shine. So I'm going to touch on that a little bit. So there's 3 different ways to register as an EEC in Illinois Shines. First one being an equity eligible contractor approved vendor. So again, approved vendors, that's the main contractual counterparty with the utility. They submit the projects directly to the program and receive those REC incentives. A benefit of being an equity eligible contractor approved vendor is access to the EEC category. So the program is separated into blocks. And each block, each project category has a set amount of capacity. So, for example, sometimes our small distributed generation or residential solar block will fill up pretty quickly. Equity eligible contractor approved vendors have access to this EEC category in addition to all the other project categories. And the other kind of main benefit that Esther touched on is the advance of capital. So they can request up to 50% of the REC contract value up front for those pre-development costs for really any pre-development costs, and that's submitted along with part 1 of the application process. And the cap there, I believe, is $750,000. So they can have, up to 50% or capped at $750,000 of that REC contract upfront for pre-development costs. And lastly, this is available to all EECs that register in our program, is access to our EEC sector strategist, who is Connor Reddig. And this is essentially a point person that's there to answer any questions. Folks can meet with this person monthly, weekly, whatever they need, and ask any questions pertaining to the Illinois Shines program. And just have that additional support. The other ways to register in the program or participate in the program is by being an EEC designee or an EEC subcontractor. So these 2 are really supporting the approved vendor in project development. So they're essentially both subcontractors to the approved vendor. The difference between the 2 is that a designee has a customer-facing role, and an EEC subcontractor does not have a customer-facing role. So EEC designees do have a little bit more reporting requirements than an EEC subcontractor does. The EEC subcontractor category was introduced a couple years ago for individuals that want to register as an EEC, but maybe they don't have a role that's directly in line with solar development. So maybe they do fencing and they don't need to register as a designee because they don't interact with the customer. Or we do see some folks who are registering for the Equity Futures Grant, register as an EEC subcontractor so that they get that EEC certificate for that grant. And so these 2, because they're not submitting projects to the program, they're not getting those incentives directly. The reporting requirements are a lot less cumbersome than an EEC approved vendor. And a little bit less benefits, so they don't have access to the EEC category or advance of capital, but being an EEC designee or an EEC subcontractor does make them kind of attractive for approved vendors to partner with. For our community solar project category, working with an EEC designee or EEC subcontractor does add additional points to the project, which makes it more likely to get chosen to move forward and to get energized in our program. And then, of course, they also get access to our EEC sector strategist. And if anybody's interested in having more resources for the application process for each of these, I do have a presentation on that I'd be happy to share. We also have resources on our websites that further distinguishes these 3 participation pathways for equity eligible contractors in the program. And then newly introduced June of this year, we did incorporate the small and emerging business category in Illinois Shine. So you might have heard this in the Illinois Solar for All program. They've had this designation since, I believe, 2024, but essentially an approved vendor can qualify either as a small business or an emerging business or both. Qualification as a small business, essentially they have to be independently owned and operated and have a gross revenue of less than 4 million in the previous calendar year. And qualification as an emerging business, so the entity has been authorized to do business in a U.S. state, district, or territory for less than 3 years. And I want to note here, the benefit of being a small and emerging business is lower. This is a little bit technical, but it's a lower batch capacity threshold. In our program, when an approved vendor submits a batch of projects, it has to be at least, their first batch of projects has to be at least, I believe, 25 or 30 kilowatts. So this lowers that, understanding that, you know, a newly introduced business to the solar space may not be able to have a portfolio of, 3 to 5 projects to submit at once in their first time. So this lowers that threshold and kind of lowers that barrier for small and emerging businesses to enter the program, start operating as an approved vendor, and receiving those incentives. And then the last thing I want to touch on is our mentorship program for Illinois Shines. Our mentorship program is meant to provide participants with training, guidance, and support to find success within the program. So this is an 8-week virtual training series with weekly calls and one-on-one meetings with the EC sector strategist. This looks like we have training videos that folks will do kind of on their own, and then every week following that training kind of schedule, we'll host an 1.5-hour meeting where they can ask questions, where we have mentors on those calls who can ask specific project questions or provide any guidance really that mentees may need. And at the end of this 8-week training series, graduates will have a graduation and networking event where all the mentees, mentors get together along with other, we'll identify some other organizations that may be helpful to partner with for these mentees, and we'll host kind of like this ceremony for them. And these resources are all publicly available for everyone. So our 25-26 presentation recordings and slide decks are on our page linked here. These are really helpful for folks entering the program and just kind of want like a guide. I personally am a visual learner, so I also sometimes reference these. They're just a good starting point. Illinois Shines is a very big and robust program. It's, incentivized, I don't know how many billions of dollars of projects, but truly is a big and expansive program. So we try to provide any and as many resources that we can. And I think the mentorship program is great for individuals just starting out in the program who need that additional support and leg up, because it can be a little bit challenging to learn, all the steps to project submittal and things like that, and all program requirements. So this is absolutely a recommendation. We do have a fall cohort happening. The registration just opened, I think, this week. And then we do have a spring cohort. So it happens twice a year. And then we just link some resources here. Some of these you may have seen across the slides, but just putting everything here that we find to be helpful, some resources that you can read on your own time. And I think Nate will probably send this to you to distribute to anybody that would like to see these slides and have access to these links. And with that, I know we have, about 25 minutes for questions here. I don't know if there's anything in the chat or if anybody wanted to come off mute and ask away.
There was one that actually just popped up in the chat that said, are you able to share the data you have on where people are working in the state?
Yeah, I just saw that
Got
one
it.
too. Okay. Oh, hashtag. Okay. So I'm looking at our Energy Workers Equity portal and I will share screen pretty soon. Okay. So let's look at this together. Ola, can you see my screen? Okay, very good. All right. So let's back up a little bit. So this is our Energy Workforce Equity portal. If you go to the Equity Data Dashboard and go to Energy Workforce Equity Portal Data, you can follow along. And this shows our equity eligible persons. And just a quick snapshot is we have a way more enrollees as equity eligible persons in the past 3 years. We're up to 3,100. And then I also believe the other day I looked, there were like 3,900. So that means that I feel like y'all are enrolling people, which is great. A lot of different options to look at, but let's look at where they are across the state. Okay. So to clarify also, this is capturing where EEPs are living. They're not capturing where EEPs are working. We don't have that information. However, you can imagine that if someone lives in someone who's living in Cook County is not going to be driving down all the way to central or southern and likewise and vice versa. So the way this works is it's a gradient. So the darker it becomes, it means that there's more EEPs in that area. And so this is our map. And you'll see that it's based upon zip code. So if you look here, you can get a kind of an interesting snapshot on where people are living across Illinois that have been registered as an EEP. Does that help, Shatavian?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you for sharing that and showing where it's at located on your guys' website. Are there any other questions that we have while we have these amazing people here ready to share?
Is
If
there
you
any
want, you can.
value in, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good.
Okay. Is there any value in us showing you the form for EEPs or finding that clean energy company list if you
No,
want to
I
give a
think that
thumbs
would
up. Okay.
be great.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely that clean energy company list.
Okay. Let's focus more on that. Just so you know, this yellow banner is at the top as soon as you get on this website, and so it's hard to miss. And this is just kind of what that form would look like. And just want to show you as service providers, are you completing this form on behalf of another individual? You would say yes if you're doing it for your clients. And then they would sign an attestation that says they've given you permission to do that. The rest is quite intuitive. Okay, so then let's go to for job seekers page. And you can scroll down and there's the get started. So you can register as equity eligible person. You can find jobs in the clean energy industry. Let's look at this first. So as I said, this job board isn't as populated. It's been on top of mind for myself and as well as Ola and the DEI team at PA to figure out how do we populate this more. So you'll find there's some jobs on here. There's estimators. There are a lot of remote jobs as well. There's actually this job board looks pretty good. I mean, before were having a lot of like engineering jobs on here, which didn't necessarily align with the kind of skills that people were coming out with for the workforce programs. So I'm seeing a little bit more diversity of jobs. Another exciting development is the Illinois Department of Employment Security has their job link board, and we've been exploring with them a way to pull clean energy company listings off of their job board, and it would create a little microsite for us, and it wouldn't live on this dashboard. It would probably live, under this get started, but it would just be a microsite to figure out how we can put this in here. But that would populate even more jobs that are available to folks. Okay. So then clean energy companies. So connecting with clean energy companies, go here. Okay. And you'll see, like I said, there's a lot more contacts on here. So you have direct contact information, phone numbers. Oh, hello. Okay, I think you click on it and it becomes like clickable. Okay, so then you have emails, company websites, contact persons. And again, I know that in workforce development, coordination of reaching out to employers is the biggest hurdle sometimes. So I hope this is helpful. And I've offered before, as well as Ola has, we're very open to feedback, to figuring out how we can support EEPs, especially folks coming out of your program. So if there's something that is helpful to you on our equity portal that can be improved, just let us know. Any questions? Oh, I see, Terrence, your question. Okay, so filtering out Southern Illinois, companies and contractors. Ola, is that an option? At least for Shines?
Sorry, let me find this question. Oh, is there a list of companies, contractors, especially in Southern Illinois? We do have our approved vendor list, which does include service territory. Esther, it'll be under exploring solar on the blue. And then find an AV designee or subcontractor. So these are all our program participants, and the approved vendor list specifically includes the service territory. Thanks, Esther, for putting that in the chat. And if you want, I could still screen share. Otherwise, if you just, that find an approved vendor button, it will ask you to download the PDF version. If you need an Excel version, please reach out to us at admin@illinoisshines.com. I'm going to put that in the chat. And we can get you the Excel version. But yes, so here in the column, it says service territory. So it very broad, but south, and then east central, west central, south. It's kind of a big area on the map, but that'll help at least narrow it down.
And I'll also add that what is the word? We've explored how do we make this list to find an AV designated subcontractor look similar to this clean energy approved companies list with the contact information. And the issue with that, with having the contact information, was it sounded like there was a bit of like spamming going on because their emails were publicly available, and then these companies were getting a lot of inundated with a lot of emails, not from workforce organizations, but from like bots and whatnot. So we're still exploring that. I totally understand the regions are really important, especially if we're talking about it being equity distributed across the state. We totally want to support Southern and Central Illinois as well. I would take a look at this list. I think a lot of these folks in this list are also in our lists of approved vendors and designees, because they are generally the ones who know about the equity portal. So if you can cross match these two, you can probably figure out where they're located. I also want to point out that we have the connect with equity eligible contractor approved vendors, designees, and subcontractors. So this is on that job seekers equity portal. And so in my experience, I found that equity eligible contractors are more skilled at working with equity eligible persons because they are majority owned by EEPs. And so you can also take a look at this list to find the way to get in touch with our equity eligible contractors. It'll give you a list of the company names and whatnot. We have quite a bit on here. And I saw a question chat.
Yeah, there was a question on how current the list is too. So I just want to note real quick while we're still on this, it's updated 1 to 2 times a month. So it is pretty updated. And then we'll throw in if anybody was suspended or withdrawn, which is those blue and orange highlighted or reddish highlighted rows. So those entities are either no longer operating in the program or they're suspended. So it's updated to include that a couple times a month.
And then just to be clear, that list you just showed, that was employers, not necessarily open like jobs.
Yes, that was approved vendors in the program. So they might not be currently hiring, but they are, again, required to comply with that minimum equity standard, which is increasing. So, we kind of expect for that need to occur at some point, that hiring need. Okay, any other questions? Making sure we didn't get anything else in the chat. I don't see anything in the chat. Does anybody have any other questions on either Illinois Shines, the portal, the equity portal, becoming an equity eligible contractor, or any of the other things that we talked about today? I know it's a lot of information, but hopefully, we kind of presented it in a pretty clear manner. But yeah, any other questions or comments? Okay.
I'm not seeing anything else pop up in the chat. And as you guys had mentioned that you guys are okay sharing the slides and all of those resources. So if something does come up, you can also go back and look at all of those resources.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yes,
Thanks
thank
for
you,
having
Nate.
us.
Really appreciate you guys coming on and giving all the great resources and information.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thanks, y'all.
All right. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday, everyone. We will see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.